All right. I planned on going live yesterday, but I wanted to come up with some more stuff for you guys. And real quick, I have not been on here for like a week because I was not feeling great. How's it going, Lord Ludacris? Had some heart issues. I still have some heart issues, but I am alive. But it's kind of zapping my energy right now. Um, I've been tweeting a lot and working on the blog, but I was not up to YouTube. Anyway, so I will go for as long as I possibly can, and we can guarantee. And if there's any audio problems, let me know. Too loud or whatever. Um, I'll go as long as I can, and we probably will be interrupted by the dog. So I'm going to play. So the National Defense Authorization Act deals with defense budget and policies. We have the UFO office that Senator Gillibrand, who you see pictured, she put up the language after Congressman Gallego had put it up in the House. That language was whittled down a little bit to where thanks, Ludacris. It's okay. It's an irregular heartbeat. It's all right now. It's still beating. So if you hear no noise, then that means I'm in trouble. Anyway, I've had this before. It just hasn't lasted this long. So it passed the House, passed the Senate. The one main thing that was taken out of the language was the fact that they're not working with civilian organizations like the Galileo Project and Ave Loeb and some other groups. Hopefully that will change in the future. Thanks, Edward. Um, so let me play this interview that was done. Kelly Meyer. Unfortunately, it's not the whole interview, but this is what she was able to get from Senator Gillibrand.
Whether it's their radar systems, whether it's through video systems, whether it's through heat sensors. And unfortunately, over
Let me
many
start it
years,
over.
the
I think I
military
clipped it.
subsystems on their aircraft, whether it's their radar systems, whether it's through video systems, whether it's through heat sensors. And unfortunately, over many years, the military sometimes does not respond well when an airman comes forward and says, I've seen something I cannot identify. And we want that era to stop. If an airman sees something that they cannot identify, we need to know what that is. We need to know if it's aircraft from a foreign adversary, such as Russia or China. And if it truly is unidentified, if it truly is unknown, we also need to know that. So, as a chair owner personnel, I need service members to be able to come forward, document something they've seen that doesn't make sense, that doesn't ring true on their air.
So that's it. It gets clipped there. I asked Kelly Meyer if the whole thing would be put up. I don't know if she saw it, but I did not get a response. As far as I know, that's the first public comments on camera that Senator Gillibrand has given. Hopefully, we hear more from her. But right now, we're just waiting President Biden to sign it, and I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. I think Douglas Dean Johnson, who's done amazing work on this, he said that he hopes it'll be signed and a done deal before Christmas. So, and I have, since the last time I was on, I have a lot of tweets, and I kind of want to make this my way of getting people who don't go on Twitter. This is my way to show you what you're missing. Although I can't cover everything, but I'm going to try. But there's some really good stuff that I found. And, all of this, like I said, one of the most important things to me is the health related effects that happen to people who have a close encounter. And close encounter, that definition will be, it'll be a little more defined tonight when I'm going to read some of my interview I did with Kit Green. I'm not going to read all of it, but I did an interview in 2019 with Dr. Kit Green. And the way that happened, and I'm not going on camera tonight. I am not prepared to be on camera since I wasn't feeling well, and I'm still not. I'm just laying around. So anyway, um, interviewed. I wrote to Kit Green a couple of years ago. It was probably the middle of 2019, and I had seen some. I think I had read the part in Phenomena by Annie Jacobsen where she talks about Kit Green and Garry Nolan's work. And actually, I can pull that up right now. I hopefully if this works because I used the intro to my Kit Green blog that I worked on. I used the intro for that blog. It was basically a blog. That's a long story. I was sent an audio tape that had been floating around basically between Kit Green and a psychic or a medical intuitive that he uses, and they were doing a session on an experiencer who was part of the study that Dr. Green was working on. I'm not sure if it was part of the OSAP study. I'm not sure if that was that, but it was an experiencer he was working with, and he wanted to get information from his intuitive, and I have that transcript on my blog. So that was sent to me, and I wrote to Kit Green. I said, "Hey, I have this transcript. Somebody sent me the audio." And he wrote back and he said, that shouldn't have been sent out, but since it is, why don't I talk to you? And I was like, all right. So we wound up doing an interview. And what else was I was going to say? Um, so I wrote a blog about it. And this is from the blog, just to give you an idea of how I first read about him. So this is from Annie Jacobsen's Phenomena. Yeah, it's a great book. Another one of those top books, even though a lot of people have issues with her when she wrote in Area 51 about Roswell being deformed humans or humans that were part of Nazi experiments, which I'm not going to get into tonight. So, anyway, here's the excerpt that I read that made me reach out to Kit Green. And she says Green accepted his patients carefully. They are all high functioning individuals, many prodigious savants, most of whom carry a high security clearance, he says. They are members of special forces, members of the intelligence community, employees of aerospace companies, officers in the military, guards of military bases, policemen. Often injuries take place of a military bivouac. I don't even know what that is if somebody jumps in. Um, Injuries take place in a military bivouac, which is an overnight mission at a secure location for the purpose of guarding, reconnaissance, or some kind of exploration. Common injuries are from something that is airborne, something that emits kind of a light or a beam, some orbs. And Jacobson says Green takes on patients who already have a thick physician case file, and those doctors have been unable to determine what injured them. My patients were physically injured by something. They have signs on their body, markings, illness, he says. They agree to give Green access to their medical history and permission for him to speak with their other doctors. None have mental illness. They and their physicians have exhausted many avenues and find themselves at the end of their rope, says Green. These patients are by majority not prone to conspiracy or PTSD. This kind of thinking would interfere with their career path. They and usually their superiors come to me because my specialty is forensic medicine. I try to determine diagnosis from very little and often highly incomplete data. I am looking at comments. So Guy says, "Hi Guy, a biovac is a temporary camp without tents." There you go. Now I am educated on the, if I'm sure I'm saying it wrong too. And then Edward says a biovac is an open field used by the military to pitch their tents. Okay. So back, I have so much stuff, guys. I have I have Kit Green stuff. I have part of my interview. I have old Kit Green stuff, which I don't think many people have seen from Jim Peniston's book, which is really interesting. And I copied some of it into a document, and I haven't even read it close because I'm really looking forward to going over it. So I'll get to that. So anyway, Green says, Jacobsen says, using the technology available to him, Kit Green orders brain scans, specialized blood, DNA, and endocrine and tests and compiles the results. At present, he has more than 100 active patients. And by the way, these are patients that he's working with Dr. Garry Nolan. Green's original hypothesis was that a majority of his patients had been exposed to technology from black programs, he says. That is, advanced, state of the art, high energy technologies developed in special access programs. In other words, not UFOs, not aliens. So that's his hypothesis at the time he was talking, or at least his original hypothesis. And as you will see, I don't think he's really strayed from that too much. Although I've spoken to him privately too, and I'm pretty comfortable saying he thinks there is something anomalous that we're dealing with. So it seems like it's a mix for him. But as far as this, um, the his patients are involved in non-lethal weapons programs, holograms, cloaking devices, drones, and that's where he thinks they were injured. 25, this is a big thing, and I've harped on this before. This is why OSAP, the program that studied health-related effects from 2008 to 2010, with Bigelow in charge, BASS, Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Aerospace Space Systems, 25% of the patients that they worked with, Green and Nolan, die within 5 to 7 years of Green's diagnosis. And I have no idea of how many. And Green says, I have no idea of how any programs I knew about years ago. It's weird. He goes, unless I copied this wrong, it says, I have no idea of how any programs I knew about years ago can do these things, which makes you think he's not leaning towards black technology, which, as you'll see though, he does. And that's even recent. We have some relatively recent quotes from him. I'm looking at comments too. If you guys have something that jumps out, put it in caps. To advance his hypothesis based on the demographics and high functioning of his patients, Dr. Green teamed up with the Nolan Lab at Stanford University, who we'll hear about later, run by Garry Nolan, one of the world's leading research scientists specializing in genetics, immunology, and bioinformatics. Nolan, trained under the Nobel Prize winning biologist David Baltimore, has published over 200, I think it's now 300 now at least, maybe 400. We'll see when we get to that. Research papers, and holds 20 biotechnology patents. Age 55, and I think this was 2018, this book? I think. Age 55, he has been honored as one of the top 20 inventors at Stanford University. Green's identity as a CIA officer remained secret until 2007 when he appeared in an episode of the PBS series Secrets of the Dead. The episode was called The Umbrella Assassin, which I talked to him about. I'm not sure if it's in my interview. Um, he wants me to interview him on stuff that's not UFO stuff because most of the work he does is not UFO or remote viewing and psychic stuff. The episode he was in was called The Umbrella Assassin. It was a Bulgarian dissident, Georgy Markov, who was killed at a bus stop in England in 78. So they think that the person who killed him might have had like a tip of poison on the end of an umbrella. And they brought in Dr. Kit Green, like, tell us what killed the guy. So that's what that episode is about, which I linked to in that blog. And for his work breaking this and other forensic medical cases over the next 5 years, Green was awarded the National Intelligence Medal. After Green officially left the CIA in 1985, he worked for General Motors Research Labs and was eventually promoted to Chief Technology Officer for Asia Pacific. He has remained an active military and intelligence science advisor for the CIA and the Department of Defense, serving on more than 20 defense science and advisory boards. So that's that. Yeah, Laura, I don't know if I think he was saying possibility they were. I don't know if he said drones in that clip. Said all different kinds of black technology. Let me see. Said injured from non-lethal weapons programs, holograms, cloaking devices, drones. So that's what he says. And he has said publicly, and I've heard too, that there are people who agree with him. There are people who disagree with him on this stuff. And you'll see there are specifics that Garry Nolan goes into related to black programs that folks who read the Vice article will know. So anyway, so that's that. And then timing wise, I'm trying to see where to go next. Give me 1 second. So I don't want to go to my interview yet. I will go to the gym. Hopefully, I can find this clip. So it's a Jim Penniston interview, and it's from Penniston's book. I think this is it. Nope, that's my interview. So Jim Penniston wrote a book, and I have to find it because I took my time. I'll pull it up right now. I took my time finding this book. So that's here we go. I found it. So it's a recent book, but Peniston talks about a meeting with Green that a lot of people, this is going to be brand new information. I know it was brand new to me. I mean, there's so many books to read out there. So and I need to put links to all this stuff. I will afterwards or tomorrow. So this is from the Rendlesham Enigma, which happened in 1980. The sighting, most people know about the Rendlesham Forest incident. I think it was December 26th and 28th, and I think there might have been a third day. I was just watching Unsolved Mysteries, which did a great job back then. It's amazing how young everybody is. They interviewed Peniston and Charles Halt. So this is from Peniston's book. He was not in the Unsolved Mysteries episode. So Green wanted to meet Peniston. Peniston agreed, but he said the terms were that his friend and lawyer Pat Frasconia would be there when Green came to visit. And I'm just going to quote from Peniston's book. I also told him that the meeting would have to be in Rockford, Illinois. I thought that would not materialize, but within 24 hours, Green agreed to a 2-day meeting in Rockford, Illinois in August 2013. Now remember, OSAP was 2008 to 2010. It ended December of 2010, and I believe Green was working with OSAP. I mean, I don't have that officially, but I'm pretty confident Green was working with OSAP and doing this kind of work with injuries and well, yeah, he did his DIRD on injuries, human related effects. That was one of the DIRDs that came out later. So, but this is 2013, so that's 3 years after OSAP ended. Green would fly Frisconia from Mississippi to Chicago, and then Kit Green reserved rooms for all three of them at a hotel in Rockford, including a conference room. So he gets there, and Peniston says conversation was somewhat open with Green. He told me that in the late 60s and early 70s, he had been an analyst for the CIA through the Stanford Research Institute and emphasized that he was actually a doctor, and that was where his career was focused. He then added that he first heard of the Rendlesham incident and was also aware of our personal plight, John Burroughs and me, during the citizens' hearing that was conducted at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., some months earlier, and that he had decided to help us with his services as a doctor and also use his associations to get us VA disability and treatment. You'll see Peniston is pretty sassy with his comments here. His approach was he said that he wanted to help me, Peniston, obtain Veterans Administration VA help and assistance. This was interesting since both Burroughs and I were already receiving stellar care from the VA with the help of our letters from both General Williams and Colonel Halt. Kit Green then shifted the conversation to a more personal level by saying he was there solely to help me, but also in the same breath came an indication that there was a more grandiose reason. To conclude with what he had already told me, I asked, so the purpose of you being here is that you are here to help me? Green stuttered and said, yes, adding that it also would help his own research with this phenomenon, especially where others who have had similar experiences are concerned. I then asked who the others were and who were being researched, and also asked if he was working for any of the three subcontractors who routinely do USAP, Unacknowledged Special Access Program, work. I then named the three major government contractors, the largest being Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC, along with Bigelow Aerospace being last. Hesitantly, Green said that he had never heard of the first two, but not in the least very convincingly. However, Green then went on to say that he is working with a group who are exploring cases that needed to be looked at. I then asked, "Are you doing subcontracting work for the government then?" Green said yes, and added that he was currently working for Bigelow Aerospace with a group of 8 other scientists and medical professionals. So OSAP ended in 2010. Green is telling Peniston in 2013 that he was currently working for Bigelow Aerospace. So what program is that? If that's true, what program is Green working with for Bigelow? And this is one of the things I didn't know when I interviewed Green that I want to follow up on and I want to ask him about. Hopefully, I'll get the chance. I don't know if he'll want to talk about this. And this is John Peniston. So these are his claims. Um, you know, Green could always say, "I never said that." So I am looking at comments. So anyway, that was new to me. Peniston continues and says, "So now his reason on being there to see me was beginning to take on a much different purpose than he had given earlier in the year, and this had become even clearer since we had begun talking." Green then said that he was researching a project about propulsion with these cases. I stopped Green mid sentence. "Oh, come on," I said. "It's not about propulsion." Green responded with, "I guess propulsion is the wrong word. I was only using that word so you could understand what I'm talking about." And Peniston's like, "Just humor me. Use the real words. If I don't understand, I'll ask." So Green continued and said, "Okay, so the real meaning from my point of view is that this is not only about the Rendlesham incident itself, but also aspects of the phenomenon we have seen in other witnesses. And rather than propulsion, we want to understand exactly how the technology enables dimensional travel. So in a sense, it is propulsion, Jim. And that's cool. I assume I'm not sure where a medical doctor who, his main goal is trying to figure out how people die. It was one of the main things he did. I'm not sure how he works into dimensional travel. I don't know how uh, I'm not sure how he plays into that. Something I need to ask him if he'll even agree that this is what he said to Peniston. So then Green said that Burroughs and especially me, Peniston, had been the closest of any of his subjects to one of these crafts related to the phenomenon. "How many have you researched?" Peniston asked. "A group of around 50 people," Green said, adding, "We are looking for what we are looking for is the signature it leaves within our DNA and in parts of our brain." So I assume he's talking about the caudate putamen, but as you'll see later on, Dr. Garry Nolan said the people who have the part of their brain that's different than normal people, they have MRIs from some of these people, and it had that effect, and it had that their brain was like that before. So we're thinking that from that, it's not caused by an encounter with a UFO. It seems like maybe those people who have that part of their brain, like that, which we'll get into, maybe they're the ones who are able to see these UFOs more. I don't know, or whoever's inside the UFOs is attracted to them. Don't know, but it doesn't seem like it's happening because of their encounters. Peniston continues. "My thoughts were right. So you could then use the signature." I'll start again. "A group of 50 people." Green said, "What we are looking for is the signature it leaves within our DNA and in parts of our brain." My thoughts were right. So that you could then use the signature to follow it back to the source of the phenomenon. I didn't tell Green what I was thinking. And then Penniston says, how many of your patients still alive?" And Green said, "Two." I was surprised. "Two?" I explained. I mean, I don't know how many patients was he working with at that point. That's the stuff I need to ask Green about. "Yes, two. You and Burroughs," Green replied. Maybe this was the early days. He did not have a lot of patients. I don't know. Adding, "Burroughs is very receptive to getting his research done. He will readily submit to the tests and a trip to Stanford Research Institute in San Francisco." Peniston's like, "So what do you need from me then?" Green hesitated for a moment and said, "We would also like you to submit an MRI blood test that could be done through your local VA after you sign a release of all your medical information, allowing me to order these tests, and then I will review the results." Green then added that Burroughs had already agreed to go to SRI in San Francisco and submit to the DNA research, MRI, and cataloging in the database there, and that he could fly us in together. "Okay," I said. "So if I do all of the things you ask me, and then what's in it for me, Dr. Green?" And this is kind of weird. He obviously does not like Green. He says, with no emotion, Green responded with, "What do you mean? You mean financially?" I found that response interesting, and I gathered that the subject of money had also been brought up when he and Burroughs had first met. I said, "No," while laughing at his suggestion. And I asked, "I mean, what purpose or advantage do I have with this testing and going to SRI?" "Well," Green said, "you'll become part of the database, and your purpose will be helping mankind with this." Green then added, "Of course, your name would not be involved, and you would be assigned a number only, and of course, you will get your VA disability. No questions asked." Now, knowing yet another reason for him being here, I told Green that I appreciated what he had told me, and I would try to help him with his requests, or at least consider it. I then asked him another question. "What's in it for you then, Dr. Green?" Green's face, which had been emotionless since we sat down, now changed to what seemed to me to be a response of fake anger at my consistent questioning of his motives, as if he was acting. And I will stop here for a second. I know, isn't this is really stuff that when I read this, I'm like, how did I not know about this? And this book is massive. This book is like 700 pages, I think. Um, hopefully Kid Green doesn't hear this, but when I was interviewing him, I had the same thing happen where I'm like, he started getting angry when we were talking about, I think it was Colaris, and he was saying he was thinking it was human. He got really angry, and I felt it. It just did not feel genuine to me. Um, so I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what Peniston was saying here. He felt like he was acting by saying, what did he say when he said, I didn't say what he said yet. So he says Green shouted a line at me that sounded like it had come straight out of the original Star Trek television series. Green, in a raised voice, said, "Damn it, Jim! I am a doctor. I only want to help people." And the line in Star Trek is, "Damn it, Jim! I'm a doctor, not a magician." I just sat there for a moment in silence, thinking, yet again, he has changed his purpose for being here. Now, he's just a doctor doing what he can to help a patient. I could not help it. I had to smile after that Star Trek related remark. The smile or grin on my face sent Green to a new level of angry. He jumped up, almost shouting that if I was going to be like this, then he would just leave and fly back home. I immediately responded in a calm voice that it was okay with me, adding that I had only driven 30 minutes to get here, and that I was more than willing to terminate the meeting if that was his wish. Green immediately calmed down. It was like a door shutting and opening again. Green then said that he had scheduled a conference room for our discussions for the next day, and we would meet at 9 a.m. Now he is okay and wants to stay, I thought. At the very least, I found Dr. Green's mood swings odd. I responded to him with, "Okay, I'll see you then." And then he goes on to talk about how his friend and lawyer Pat Frisconia had related how the Burroughs meeting went with Green. And if you listen to John Burroughs, I have some Burroughs stuff on my blog. When he was on with Linda Moulton Howe, they had the show Phenomenon Radio. He talked about his encounter with Dr. Green, and but he was skeptical too about giving up his blood, and he really did not want to give up his DNA. Um, so then Pat said right after Burroughs and he had met Dr. Green in a motel in Flagstaff, Arizona. This is before the meeting with Peniston. After only 15 minutes, Green said he had another doctor coming to see Burroughs, but Pat had to leave the room. And when he got back, Burroughs was standing with his shirt off being examined by Green. So Burroughs had problems with his heart, so you can't blame him. Um, Peniston was a lot more skeptical. So Burroughs had consented to a physical examination. And Pat was told Burroughs also agreed for Green to have the fellow doctor who Green had said was currently working with, and who was on his team, fly from California to Las Vegas the next day and then drive to Flagstaff to collect Burroughs' blood. I do remember Burroughs talking about this. Peniston said, "Wow, really?" Yeah, Burroughs was eager to accommodate Green with a blood sample for DNA testing. Anyway, so I'm not going to read this. This is a really long segment. Um, I will skip a little bit, just read a little more of this. Next morning, I enjoyed breakfast, met Kit Green and Pat Frisconi outside the conference room. And then Green complained that the noise from across the hallway was too loud. The air conditioner was too loud. And Penniston was like, "What the hell? It's not that loud. What is your problem?" So Green called the hotel and they moved him to a gigantic room that could fit 25 people. So it was just the three of them sitting at a table. And Penniston said he was a little uncomfortable with Green's edgy demeanor. And I'm trying to see if there's any other ending here. To make sure, so I was already suspicious of Green and suspected he was going to record the conversation. To make sure he didn't, I reminded Green that it was against the law in the state of Illinois to record a person without permission, especially if the person was unaware. Green then responded, "I'm not recording anything." And I said, "Fine, I would not have given you permission anyway." As it turns out, during the whole 2-day meeting, not one written note was taken. I find that quite astonishing. So I'm trying to see what else. So that's that. I'm not going to read everything from there. Let me get out of that, and I will read some of my interview with Kit Green, which I quoted on Twitter the other day. Um, but I'll read a little more. I'm trying to think what else. I'll find it now. So I just need to find my interview with Dr. Kit Green. Here we go. So this was 2019. Um, when I wrote him, the reason he said he was willing to talk to me is because I had not made up my mind on what UFOs represent, and he really liked that, supposedly. And he does have a sense of humor, and I'm trying to find the spot which I was going to talk about, and I have lost it. But he was worried that when he told me his opinion that I would be upset. So he goes, "Now, do you want me to tell you what I've decided?" Basically, about his opinion on the phenomena. "This is going to be very disappointing to you, I think." And I said, "It won't be. With all the odd injuries," so we're talking about injuries here, and then we'll get to the Garry Nolan Vice interview. I also transcribed the other interview he did with Jesse. I forget Jesse's last name. I finished that today. Green says, "With all the odd injuries and everything else, I don't have to believe in aliens or abductions to explain the medical data." Thanks, Lord Ludacris. I appreciate that. And that's my conclusions. It doesn't mean that if somebody who is a patient or a friend or a family member or a journalist. Oh, let me see. Well, hold on. I got to interrupt. I may disagree with you on Davis Wilson notes, but I do love your passion and attention to detail. Thank you. Trust me. What I am so the reason I have good reasons for being confident about Davis Wilson being a legitimate document. Not that it actually happened. I don't know that. That's just an opinion that that Wilson did meet with those folks, and the people who he met with told him what their program was about. That I don't know. I mean, my opinion is yes, but I'm very strong that Davis did meet with Wilson. But like I said in the past, if I gave out my sources and why I believe that, I mean, publicly available information, I came to that conclusion. But then, like in the past 4 months, spoke to more people, and I was like, oh, obvious. All right, this is a done deal. Anyway, thank you for that. All right, so I don't have to believe in aliens or abductions to explain the medical data, and that's my conclusions. That doesn't mean that if somebody who is a patient or a friend or a family member or a journalist or anybody says, do I believe that there is possibly aliens, or do I believe there is possibly extraterrestrials or ultra terrestrials or something like that? I'd say I'm really, really open minded to that. But I will tell you is I've never had a patient that I've had to use those extraterrestrials or aliens or abduction experiences to explain any of my medical data. Basically, whatever injuries they have, he believes can be, caused by human technology. My follow-up would be, and if I was actually paying attention at this point, I would have said, so just because you think humans can cause this, that doesn't mean, I mean, some advanced species could be using similar technology. But I understand what he's saying. You would think if they were that advanced, their technology would be that much different, but who knows? I mean, there's no way to know. Absolutely no way to know. Happy Saturday, Michael. I'm in like I always am. Saturday night, excitement in Las Vegas with Cookie. Um, I don't need magic. I don't have to use alien hypothesis to explain them. I could do better with advanced medical technology, which leads to a whole set of different questions. So that I have this is not proofread. I have to fix typos. So this leads to a whole set of different questions. He said to me. He goes, "Well, then, who do you who do you think is doing it?" And I have to say, I can't talk about that. First, I do not know. And secondly, some of what I suspect is due to classified reasons, and I won't discuss it for that. But in particular, I have no evidence that the body is elevated up in any way, much less a spacecraft. I actually don't believe that. But I can't say I can prove it is not true. And I said even John Mack in his later book, Passport to the Cosmos, was considering that it was non-physical, at least some of it. He goes, "Yeah, I think that opens up much terribly more dangerous explanations. It basically leads down a road that is waiting for what I think you want in this conversation, which is okay, if it's possible that a human organization, particularly a non-government one, is doing this, and this is I've done this in kit impersonation before." He goes, if it's a non-government organization doing this, the question is why, how, where, how much money, for what purpose? And that's I spent a great deal of time with my colleagues talking about, because we think that's enough of a possibility. We are investigating the dickens out of who it might be. And I can tell you, none of us think it's the United States government. So I should have jumped in and said, do you think it's Americans or international, a non-governmental group made up of Americans? I mean, I have so many follow-ups that if I get to talk to him again on the record that I need to ask. And I'll go a little more. I want to get to the Vice article. There's some people who don't use Twitter and who have no idea. There are people on Twitter who had no idea the Vice article was even out. The only thing I could think of that goes against, and I'll check out comments in a second. The only thing I could think of that goes against it being black technology, this is me, is something that Dr. Garry Nolan said in the Phenomena book. Talking about the experiencers, he says some people seem to repeatedly attract the phenomena or the experiences. They act like an antenna or a lighthouse in the dark. If that's true, wouldn't that suggest it was something that knew that these people were special? I wouldn't think black technology would be attracted to certain people. It seems like your hypothesis is that it's just a random encounter with this technology. Or are you not saying that? No, I'm not. In fact, I'm glad you raised this early in the conversation. I totally agree with Garry, but I can tell you the details of why Garry says he says what he did. What you quoted, he said, is at the 100,000 foot level. What I believe, which is totally in agreement, is at the 10,000 foot level. This starts talking about things that are really, really interesting. People who are experiencers have come to be experiencers because they are different from the average population, and they are related to being beacons for reasons that include genetics, but it's probably not because somebody's doing something like using them as a beacon to remotely read their DNA. It's more likely because of a selection hypothesis, which I believe, and I think Gary does too. For 5 or 10 years, I was working on the general hypothesis that the people that were in my patient population that were being injured because they were being targeted in some way, because they were excellent remote viewers or because they had some other characteristic. And I was working on the hypothesis that somehow whatever the organizations were that were causing the harm and the injuries. Dr. Green went silent for a few seconds. By the way, when I go quiet for a minute, it's because I'm about to cough and hit the mute button so I don't blow your eardrums out. And I said, well, I thought you might have been abducted, but all right. And he said, when they come to get me, it takes them a lot more time. I really fight those suckers off. Anyway, so he's able to joke, and which I could tell right away. And so they don't really get me, meaning the aliens abducting him. I had a lot of data, and I have a colleague in London. He's an attorney. He's an expert at this stuff. Kind of. So let me just check out the comments here. On the places I've been, there was something. I'm sorry if I don't put it up. Memory Teals. Okay. So, like I said, if you have any questions, put them in bold. So, his friend, the attorney in London, is an expert in this stuff. Thanks, Lord Ludicrous. I haven't read this in a while. I need to go over it again because I know some of it's slightly inaccurate typo wise. So his friend in London, the attorney, is an expert in this stuff, kind of like a guy named Jacques Vallée is an expert in it. And so I would love to know who this attorney in London is. So I periodically go there and I brief him on everything I do. He's also got a wife, incidentally, who is an internist, an MD internist. Anyway, I made a presentation. I came back 6 months later, made another presentation, and I told him what I thought. It took me 8 hours to brief him at that point. He says, you're making a mistake. The only mistake you are making is that these people aren't being beacons. It's because they share comorbid, more than one disease or condition is present in the same person at the same time. They share comorbid executive function and competencies. All the people that are your patients, you have such a narrow collection of patients, just such a tiny, tiny slice of people who think they've been abducted and been injured. Such a tiny percentage of people who are involved in UFOs that see them in the sky. You're excluding 90% of the UFO abductee and injured population. It's that the people who are injured all come from such a selected population that they're all special forces, they're all highly skilled, they're all high IQs, they're all high performers in intelligence, the military, aerospace industry, astronauts. I mean, they're people who are the best of the best, and they happen to be in the places that are really, really super dangerous. Duh. And so they get injured. This is his friend speaking, and they're getting injured by something that nobody's ever considered as a threat before because the injury is so damn weird and the ideology of the injury is so damn unknown. So I went back and I talked to Gary about this and a few other people in my confederation, and we kind of looked at each other across the table and said, "Holy shit. These are people who are in fact 3 sigma, 4 sigma, 5 sigma out in the bell-shaped curve of human competency." So they're really, really, really intelligent people. And they happen to be where they are because the selection systems for those jobs have over selected them. And I believe that's true. I don't think it's anything to do with them being targeted, although I will share with you that many of my Confederation members don't quite agree with that. And that's okay. I mean, good gosh, I only came to this conclusion. And let me say one thing. He made me make sure I say this was done December of 2019. His opinions may have changed since this interview was conducted. So I just want to say that for the record, he made sure that when I published it, which I have not, that I would put that in there. I mean, I've been looking at people who are really injured, but not necessarily so formally for 40 years. And then I get into Uri Geller. I'll do this really quick. I'm not going to read the rest of this. I'm going to save this. But I said, did you have any interest in this when you were younger, before you got into the CIA? Were you exposed to Uri Geller? Before you got into the CIA and were exposed to Uri Geller, anything at all when you were younger? Nope. No experiences? Nope. I don't have any experiences. I try to convince myself that there have been a few, but I would really say they were pretty boring, even if I could remember them, and I don't spend much time on it. There was one and only one. Actually, there were two things. I should not be this cavalier. One thing, when I was a young child, 12 years old, 15 years old, my mom and dad, my dad was a physician, my mother was an artist. We're all from Wisconsin. Uh, Told me a weird story about a classic case where they were up at a lake up in northern Wisconsin. I mean, they saw a UFO. They didn't even know what to call it. It was like a whole bunch of people on the lake saw it coming out of the water, floating up around the water silently. What they said was a funny thing. It looked like a pie plate with a dome on it. Blah 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 blah. It's like, yeah, for me it wasn't blah 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 blah. He's like, yeah, this, the same old sighting you hear of a classic disc, flying saucer. And they described it and they didn't know what it was. They were describing it was like 1952, and they described what they had seen before World War II, about 1930, when they were up at college. And I added, just to clarify, in 1952, Green's parents told him about a UFO sighting they had around 1930, a transmedium craft in northern Wisconsin. The other thing was, my mom, when I was in college, sent me a book as a present when I was in college. It was J.B. Ryan's book about psychic research with the Zener cards. Those are the telepathy cards where it's five symbols and you have to guess. And I think you have a 20% chance of getting it right. And there are people that have done, I think, over the long haul, it's above chance. I don't know what the number is in the all overall Zener card experiments, but it's above chance. He goes, so that's it. Those are experiences. Real quick, did you ever work with any remote viewers you consider to be superstars? The answer to your question is yes, double yes, and triple yes. I've known three. Now I've examined dozens and dozens in the early program, the CIA, and the Army program that went from 1985 through 1994, 93, or whatever. I've seen data of about 100 really good remote viewers, and of that 100 or so, three were superstars. I'm going to say this again so it comes out in capital letters and italicized. In the domain of what the data was that these remote viewers were looking at, I have known three that were essentially 95. Actually, if I tell the truth, really 100% accurate all the time, every day, whenever. One was Uri Geller, one was Pat Price, and one was a person whose name did not want to be used. And I should add a fourth person who is almost as good as they are, Ingo Swann. Now, I repeat what I just said in italics. I can't speak to the accuracy of any of the three of them when they are describing a domain about which I have zero professional credentials. Like when Uri Geller said, who waxes eloquently about things he saw among the water floating around Earth, writes that he sees in Alaska, writes, and then he's looking out over the water and seeing something elevate out of the water and all that stuff that's in his book. I don't know anything about those things. When one of those people talks about looking under the earth and seeing things that are subterranean, I don't know anything about that stuff. As far as I'm concerned, that all sounds, when Pat Price talks about cloud formations in part of the earth that he sees right over a submarine base and all that, that all sounds nuts and crazy. But when those people I named talk about something that I know that I can verify myself, they're 100%. And that tends to be medical, or if not medical, it tends to be things about people's interactions with people where I can talk to the people involved. So in other words, he's saying you can, as long as he's talking about feedback. If somebody says, by the way, I just remote viewed that this person that you made me remote view has a tumor on the right side of their chest, Kit Green can go get an MRI and confirm that. So that's what he's talking about. And those people, when they give him information that he can verify, they're close to 100% accurate. And the Uri Geller people who think he's a total fraud, I'm sorry that if that upsets you, but Kit Green was in the program very early before it even started. Anyway, and I'm gonna look at some comments here. Dexter, how you doing? I'm doing good. I'm doing okay. I'm catching up. It probably sounds like Green was trying to determine if signatures was left behind on experiences. Yeah, and um, yeah, that was in the Peniston book. He's talking about signatures and trying to figure out. I need to go over that again. Go back on my own stuff. Um, he said propulsion, but I don't know why you would use him as propulsion. Um, anyway, I'm sorry if I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, anything remote viewing metaphysical cannot confirm. Just like this, the extraterrestrial stuff that the the intuitive that the transcript on my blog, which is up, he can't confirm that stuff. She talks about extraterrestrials and under base stuff. What's up, Pix? Blah blah blah. It's like I know. It's like for him, it's blah blah blah. It's like this is 1930, kid. This is not blah blah blah. If your parents really saw transmedium craft in 1930, I'm pretty sure most folks would agree that's not black technology. So, all right, for people who read the Vice article, this is going to be boring for you because I want to go to that because we start getting into the back into the caudate putamen, and Nolan has done interviews in the past. He did an interview with James Iandoli, and he did an interview with the the debrief MJ Benias. He did an interview with, I'm not sure if James did an interview, but he had an article on it. Nolan did an interview with Phenomenon Radio with Linda Moulton Howe and John Burroughs. And now I need to find his Vice interview that came out. And of course, I cannot find it, which is, I want to get back into, sorry, I have to find it. If you guys have any questions in the meantime, why can I not find it? I thought I had it. So I will go to, I know what I'll go to. Before that, I will go to my Twitter. And this was the day it came out. So it came out, and I was not expecting it. And there's a paper that came out about testing of materials. I have the paper, but there's no definitive conclusion in the paper. It's just the beginning. They're how they test. It's a new way to test. Very, very, very sensitive equipment in his lab, and it's the beginning. It was in a reputable journal, so that's the big part of it. And it's going to go from there. It didn't receive a lot of attention. Like this didn't receive a lot of attention. Surprisingly, like I said, some people didn't even know about it. And I quoted a little bit. This is me. I don't know what the hell I'm saying here. Valet, Kit Green, Eric Davis, and Colin Keller, all roads lead to them when it comes to UAP. That's Dr. That's Nolan. Sorry, that's Nolan in the article in the Vice article. I need to pull up the Vice article. Cases with injuries. I have my private thoughts about what I think is going on, and some of them I'm very sure about. I'm open to being wrong, except most of the time I know I'm right. So I do not know his private thoughts about what he thinks is going on. I would love to know that. Maybe if I go to Vice, and I could actually pull it up this way. Let's see. Yes, I can. So I will pull that up and I'll get ready and see if you guys have any questions. Caught up. Let me get this bigger. Yeah, that's funny that you were able to catch up by listening twice speed. Yeah, you're welcome. This is one of my favorite things to go over Kit Green stuff because a lot of people don't know it, and for me, a lot of it was new to me to go over again today. So, see, 1 second, I will just take a drink of whiskey. Kidding, no whiskey. Ads. And I can't close it on there. So, Dr. Garry Nolan is a professor of pathology at Stanford University. His research ranges from cancer to systems immunology. Dr. Nolan has also spent the last 10 years working with a number of individual analyzing materials from alleged unidentified aerial phenomenon. His robust, if you hear me go silent for a second, I'm muting myself and yelling at the dog for biting himself. His robust resume, 300 research articles, 40 US patents, founding of 8 biotech companies, and honored as one of Stanford's top 25 inventors, makes him easily one of the most accomplished scientists publicly studying UAPs. And this is written by Thoby Campion. Other board sat down with Dr. Nolan, did this talk with him, blah, 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 edited for length and clarity. The first version was changed because they made mistakes. So this is the newer version. And there's an interview he did with Jesse Michels for American Alchemy, which I finished transcribing today, which was originally transcribed by David Haith. And I added my own twist and changed it a little bit because I have my specific way of doing transcripts. So, motherboard, how long have you been interested in UAPs, Dr. Nolan? I've always been an avid reader of science fiction, so it was natural at some point that when YouTube videos about UFOs began to make the rounds, I might watch a few. I noticed a guy at the time, Dr. Greer, had claimed that a little skeleton might be an alien. I remember thinking, oh, I can prove or disprove that. And so I reached out to him. I eventually showed it was not an alien, it was human. We explained a fair amount about why it looked that way, the way it did. I had a number of mutations in skeletal. It had a number of mutations in skeletal genes that could potentially explain the biology. The UFO community didn't like me saying that. So I had people coming at me when I was promoting Nolan a couple of years ago, saying he is a fraud. He's part of the cover up. That's an alien skeleton. The UFO community didn't like me saying that, but the truth is in the science, so I had no problem just stating the facts. We published a paper and it ended up going worldwide. It was on the front page of just about every newspaper, major newspaper. What's more appealing or clickbait than Stanford professor sequences alien baby? And there's a picture of Atta, I think they called it Atta, Atacama skeleton. There are people mad that Nolan even got involved in that. They should have not. It's desecration of that skeleton. All right. Um, I'm glad he did it. That ended up bringing me to the attention of some people associated with the CIA and some aeronautics corporations. I'm looking at comments. People have asked me about Ramirez before. I mean, I've written, I've tweeted, I've spoken about David Icke, and I get slammed for bringing up Icke for several reasons, which I don't need to get into, which I think you guys know about. Um, I I think Ramirez did what he did, but all the other stuff is just his hypothesis, and I don't think it's based on any evidence that he has that we don't have, as far as I know. It's never come up in I've never had it come up in any of the people I've spoken to, except one time somebody said there's a lot of stuff going on, but they didn't say specifically reptilians. Um, I'm open to the possibility that, and Nolan goes over this in his interview, in the one I transcribed, that what we're seeing as far as beings is Nolan says that it's maybe just their way to communicate with us. It's so alien to us that they are using beings. Maybe they're AI. He doesn't say AI, but maybe that's just a way. Just like we want to communicate with animals, we'll put in a little fake animal, like a fake animal, to get them, accustomed to it. Maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe reptilians or grays, they're all AI. They're all just made. That's really not representative of the phenomenon. That's just like, as I've said before, a proxy that they use. Um, the real thing may not be anything physical, you know, but it's speculation. That's really all I have to say about Ramirez. I know he's made the rounds. He's reached out to me, but it's like I don't really want to keep doing the same interviews with people that are going around doing the same shows. I'd rather do this, which is different. I'd rather do this, and I'm not doing it for any reason. It's just because I like Not that I like to talk. I do like to write more than talk, but anyway, that's my Ramirez comment. Yeah, the whiskey. It's I don't like whiskey. I do not like whiskey. I like beer. Paula Harris about the I don't want to spend any time on that Atacama thing. It's just when it comes to science, I trust Gary Nolan. I don't know what Paula Harris thinks about it, but I know Gary Nolan also said that the Star Child skull was not anomalous. And I was friends with Lloyd Pye, who held that Star Child skull for a long time. Um, Passed away a few years ago, but Nolan, Nolan's obviously, if you read his interviews, he's open to the extraterrestrial, to the hyperdimensional. I mean, interdimensional. I don't think he's, you know, somebody that Harris can debate, but somebody else could do the debate. I'm not going over the ADA stuff anymore. He caught up at 3.25 the speed. We're in a symbiotic relationship with an intelligence that masquerades. And I read that quote, and I don't think I came up with it on my own. I read it from other people like Valet and I love that quote from McKenna because Valet and Keel say stuff. I think more Keel. We're in a symbiotic relationship with an intelligence that masquerades as an alien invasion as in order not to alarm us. I don't know if that's why they do it, but I definitely lean in that direction today. Tomorrow you could show me something else, um, you know, and I could say something different. But I do like that explanation. What I just think there's assuming some of the injuries are from non-human technology. I just think this intelligence wouldn't it would seem that they wouldn't care about us. They might be above us on the food chain, like I've talked about before, like when we step on ants or we kill a deer in the middle of the road and it sucks, but it's like, oh well, we're living our lives. So maybe that may be what's going on, but I don't know. Um, so I get the feeling that Kit Green knows more than you realize. Oh, I'm sure Kit Green does know more. There's one interview he talks about programs he's been read into. It's actually in my interview, which I haven't read in so long, which I need to. I will reach out to him soon and ask him. And if he says no, he doesn't want to finish and let me do follow ups, then I'll just put it out. I'll fix it, the typos. I'll edit it to make sure he doesn't repeat himself because it was an informal interview, but I was recording. He knew I was recording. Um, as far as me not catching on to what he's implying, it depends. I mean, I need to talk to him again. I need to get stuff clarified because he said that the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon basically has everything you need to know. Um, I don't know what his hypothesis is, but some of the people who are injured by black, if it, I've said this before, the Oregon case, the person's injured by an orb, and then the daughter goes home. The father's injured, the daughter goes home, and it's hitchhiker type effects in her house. I don't think that's black technology. So people are being injured by something that's not human. So I don't know if it's a mix of black technology. You'll see in this article, Skinwalker Ranch, and this, mix of non-human or whatever and human. I don't know. But I'm open-minded to some of it being black tech. Why am I not seeing all of your comments? It's not showing up on my screen. Um, Try to get an interview with Ramirez. He always has something new to say. I mean, maybe Light Pie was great. I met him at his lecture in Florida. We became friends. He came back to Florida one day, and he went to the local news station. They interviewed him, and I went along with him. And yeah, he was a great presenter. He was a big believer in the Sitchin stuff, which I'm not so sure about. And I don't know if you guys could. I'm not seeing the entire message from you guys when I put it up. I don't know if you can see it. The Russian Greys. Thought on Annie Jacobsen, the Russian Greys. I think Knapp spoke to the same person and had a different take. That same person that Annie Jacobsen spoke to, and he spoke to that person before they died, obviously. Um, Totally different take. Roswell was not human. I think that person said there was a live alien at Area 51 at one point. Um, so Anyway, let me keep reading. So his work brought the attention of some folks associated with the CIA and some aeronautics corporations. At the time, they had been investigating a number of cases of pilots who had gotten close. Oh, by the way, in the article, the paper that Valet and Nolan wrote, and Larry Lemke, and there's one more person whose name I don't have offhand. They also, Nolan. They talk about the ATIP stuff. So it brings up those subjects in that paper, and that's a mainstream paper. So it'll get people thinking. It's just the very beginning. It's not the smoking gun. I tweeted out a couple of months ago to lower expectations because I heard it was not going to be a smoking gun. It's just the beginning of a process of how they're going to be testing these materials with their fancy smanchy equipment, which I read the whole paper, and I'm telling you, it's so far over my head to understand that stuff. Anyway, he talks about the pilots who had gotten close to supposed UAPs in the fields generated by them, as claimed by the people who showed up at his office. And there was enough drama around the skeleton, Atta, that I had basically decided to forever forswear all continued involvement in this area. Then these guys showed up and said, "We need to help you with this because we want to do blood analysis." And everybody says you've got the best blood analysis instrumentation on the planet. Then they started showing the MRIs of some of these pilots and ground personnel and intelligence agents who had been damaged. The MRIs were clear. You don't even have to be an MD to see that there was a problem. Some of their brains were horribly, horribly damaged. And so that's what kind of got me involved. If you guys have been over this before, I know there are people who don't know about this article. So you'll have to bear with me on this. Does the Department of Pathology at Stanford have a track record of pulling practical jokes on you? I thought it was a practical joke at the beginning, but no, nobody was pulling a practical joke. And just as an aside, the school is completely supportive and always has been of the work I've been doing. When the Atacama thing hit the fan, they stepped in and helped me deal with the public relations issues around it. Are you able to mention which folks from the government departments other than aeronautics approached you? No, I am not. Can you describe the more anomalous effects on the brains you observed with the MRIs? If you've ever looked at an MRI of somebody with multiple sclerosis, there's something called white matter disease. It's scarring. It's a big white blob or multiple white blobs scattered through the MRI. It's essentially dead tissue where the immune system has attacked the brain. That's probably the closest thing that you could come to if you wanted to look at a snapshot from one of those individuals. You can pretty quickly see that there's something wrong. So the left is a normal brain, the right is an injury and resulting white matter disease. How many patients did you take a look at in the first phase? It was around 100 patients. They were almost all defense or governmental personnel or people working in the aerospace industry, people doing government level work. Here's how it works. Let's say that a DoD personnel gets damaged or hurt. Odd cases go up the chain of command, at least within the medical branch, and nobody knows what to do with it. It goes over to what's called the weird desk, where things get thrown in a bucket. And by the way, I did ask Kit Green about the weird desk, and um, I said I always had this vision of the weird desk. Somebody sitting at the desk, and it's got all these UFO and psychic books behind the person sitting there. He's like, no UFO books, no psychic books. He goes, that was such a small part of what I did with the CIA. I go, does it annoy you that people always bring up the weird desk and you when it was barely such a small part, it was such a small part of what you did? He's like, yes, it annoys me a lot. I forget the word he used. I don't know if he said it pisses him off, but yes, that's why he said he wanted to do an interview with me back then on his non-UFO and non-remote viewing work. Because that's most of what he does, or most of what he did. And now he's a medical doctor. He's got a practice. So anyway, he goes, somebody at the weird desk says, oh, there's something interesting in this bucket worth following up on that all look reasonably Similar. Science works by comparing things that are similar and dissimilar to other things. Enough people were having very similar kinds of bad things happen to them that it came to the attention of a guy by the name of Dr. Kit Green. He was in charge of studying some of these individuals. You have a smorgasbord of patients, some of whom had heard weird noises buzzing in their head, got sick, etc. A reasonable subset of them had claimed to have seen UAPs, and some claimed to be close to things that got them sick. Let me show you the MRIs of the brains of some of these people. And here's a hypomorphism in head of the caudate putamen. So basically, the part of the brain which he talks about, and that's the photo. And he says, we started to notice there were similarities in what we thought was the damage across multiple individuals. As we looked more closely, though, we realized, well, that can't be damaged because it's right in the middle of the basal ganglia, a group of nuclei responsible for motor control and other core brain functions. If those structures were severely damaged, these people would be dead. That was when we realized that these people were not damaged, but had an overconnection of neurons between the head of the caudate and the putamen. The caudate nucleus plays a critical role in various higher neurological functions. The putamen influences motor planning, learning, and execution. If you looked at 100 average people, you wouldn't see this kind of density, but these individuals had it. An open question is, did coming in contact with whatever it was cause it or not? He answers that in the other interview. I'm not sure if he answers it here, where he says some of the folks who had MRIs before they had this encounter had, you know, the nerve bundles were more dense. Of course, you could always say, well, maybe they had an experience at a younger age in life, and that caused the density of the neurons, and they just don't remember that experience. So it's hard to tell. Um, and I'm going to pause 1 second so I can yell at the dog. For a couple of these individuals, we had MRIs from prior years. They had it. Here we go. They had it before they had these incidents. It was pretty obvious then that this was something that people were born with. See, my follow-up would be, is it possible they had another experience that they don't remember, and that's what caused it? Anyway, it's a goal, sub-goal setting planning device. It's called the brain within the brain. He's talking about the caudate putamen. It's an extraordinary thing. This area of the brain is involved partly in what we call intuition. For instance, Japanese chess players were measured as they made what would be construed as a brilliant decision that is not obvious for anybody to have made that kind of leap of intuition. The area of the brain lights up. We had found people who had this in spades. These are all so-called high-functioning people. They're pilots who are making split-second decisions, intelligence officers in this field, etc. Everybody has this connectivity region in general, but let's say for the average person that the density level is 1x. Most of the people in the study had 5x to 10x and up to 15x the normal density in this region. In this case, we are speculating that density implies some sort of neuronal function. And that's a correlation between genetics and the caudate, which I don't think he talks about. He does in previous interviews, though, which I need to transcribe. I will go and look at your questions. It looks like the brain damage from inducing. Sorry if I'm not going back all the way. Could be. Who knows? I don't know. Looks like the brain damage from inducing psychic activity. Some tissue areas get flooded with focused influence. Most abductees would tell you before they get the ET stare down that they feel head pains in focus areas in the skull, including other sensations. I didn't see what his assessment was. Did not see. What did Pick say? Nolan says it's human. From what I understand, approximately 4% of DNA analysis was anomalous, yet you can argue with Nolan. He's on. I don't know what the heck that. Tonight is a special fireworks night, and my dog is shaking. I don't know. You can hear that. It's supposed to be lasting for like 10 minutes. The dog hates fireworks, and he's running away now. I don't know what the celebration is. Some anniversary. Nolan says it's human. From what I understand, approximately 4% of DNA analysis was anomalous, yet he asserts nothing to see here. Human comes in many forms. Bone densities indicated in an age 4 to 6 years. You can ask him that. Ask him on Twitter. As long as you're not attacking, there are people that come at him. I remember it was a couple of years ago saying, "You're lying. You're part of the cover up." He's not going to respond to that. I responded, but so you should try responding to him on that. Obviously, yeah. I don't know how that would show up. It's not really it's only a little bit anomalous. Would it show up? I don't know. I don't have any emotional tie whatsoever to the Atta stuff. I didn't spend any time on it. I saw it in the Greer movie. Yeah, I don't think Greer. I don't think Nolan reversed his position, and Greer has paid a huge price because Greer has made his own bed and made so many mistakes. So many mistakes. So I don't even want to go there with Greer. Take away Atta. There's so many issues I have with Greer, and I've avoided speaking about it because I'm not going to go negative. Anyway, so imagine you should ask him. I don't think him and Harris would be a great debate. To tell you the truth, I don't think he would debate her. But I do like debates. I love debates. In fact, I was hoping there would be a debate show one day with all of this stuff. Anyway, sorry if I get riled up about Greer, but guy did great work in the early days. I think. I know a lot of people love him, so I don't really get involved. I don't really say much about him on Twitter. I don't really say much about him ever. He did great work with the Disclosure Project and the witnesses he pulled together. Even though some of those witnesses I don't think were great witnesses. Anyway, of the 100, did the people who claim that they had an encounter, especially the pilots, describe any perceivable decrease in neurological capacity? Of the 100 or so patients we looked at, about a quarter of them died from their injuries. That's what I was saying earlier. The majority of these patients had symptomology that's basically identical to what's now called, here we get confusing, majority had what is similar to what we call Havana syndrome. We think amongst this bucket list of cases, we had the first Havana syndrome patients. Once this turned into a national security problem with the Havana syndrome, I was locked out of all of the access to the files because it's now a serious potential international incident if they ever figured out who's been doing it. That still left individuals who had seen UAPs. They didn't have Havana syndrome. They had a smorgasbord of other symptoms. How does the impact of electromagnetic frequencies factor into your hypotheses about what exactly transpired here? This is important too. I can't go back and forth between this and Twitter, but I'll tie it in. With one of the patients, it happened on the Skinwalker Ranch. Given how deep into their brain the damage went, we can actually estimate the amount of energy required in the electromagnetic wave somehow aimed at them. We don't think that has anything to do with UAPs. We think that that's some sort of state actor, and again, related to Havana syndrome somehow. So that person who stepped up and said, "That's me," they're talking about is Thomas Winterton. That's his brain damage. They spoke about it in season 1. Winterton came on Twitter, said, "That's me," and he doesn't. He thinks maybe there's a mix of UAP and state actors on the ranch. Brandon Fugel chimed in, says he does not think, from what he has learned, that it was a state actor involved. There are other people that disagree with Nolan and Green. And I'm sure there are people that agree with them. So that one's up in the air. I know there are people that think everything at Skinwalker Ranch is human black tech. I do not think that whatsoever. This goes way back in that whole basin, that whole area, so I don't think it's human. Is it possible that black tech is piggybacking and hiding their black tech, and using UFOs as a cover? Yeah, that's possible. I'm not really sure how they're going to prove this, one way or the other. But it's controversial either way. And what else? Well, they already did. They don't want to link Havana syndrome with UP. It would open a can of worms within the confines of public disclosure. I mean, I did not expect to see that in this article. Lou has talked about a connection between UAP and Havana syndrome. No details, so I don't know if he was talking about this. I don't know. But now that we have this on record, the next time Lou is interviewed, Lou could be asked about this. I mean, somebody was, and I was speculating maybe some state actors, maybe somebody from Russia, they were able to mimic UAP technology and they're using it against us. I don't know. There's a lot of follow-ups that need to be asked about this. Hopefully I will get to interview Dr. Nolan. Other than MRIs, what technologies were you using to analyze the patients? And as the bombs are going off outside, hopefully they're not too loud, we did a deep psychological evaluation of all these people just to make sure that they were stable and they were not dealing with obviously delusional individuals. My role in the initial project was analysis on blood using a device called CyTOF, which was something that I had been involved in the development of. The problem was that we couldn't really conclude very much because many of the cases happened years before I ended up getting the blood. With an acute injury to be seen in some telltale signature, we need to collect within 4 or 5 days or a couple of weeks. But blood from an individual a couple of years out will not be useful. What I told the people in the government is that I need access to their blood while the case is still acute, which is why it's so important to have a UFO program that has field workers that can go out and fly across the country if they have to. Hopefully we can have people on both coasts in the all over the country, so they don't have to fly coast to coast. You know what I'm talking about. We have various groups, so they only have to fly 1 or 2 hours max to get to a case. So if somebody was injured, they could do the blood work right away, or they can somehow get the blood work shipped to them right away if they just go to a local doctor. So that's why it's important, the whole OSAP thing. But yeah, we start mixing in Havana syndrome, then it's going to be so messy trying to figure out what the hell we're dealing with. Is there anything man-made that might have this impact on the brain? And Nolan says the only thing I can imagine is you're standing next to an electric transformer that's emitting so much energy that you're basically getting burned inside your body. Depth of ionizing radiation. So they're judging the technology used to create that injury by how deep it went. Are you simply attempting to document what you see, or are you looking for a cause as well? Yes, it's kind of the natural way that science is done. First you catalog, then you organize, then you say, well, this is similar to what this and this other thing is similar, but to that, but why is this other thing different? And then if you have enough data, you start to look for causes. I do that every day with our cancer work. We always try to come up with hypotheses on why something is. Hypotheses are innumerable. They are proof of nothing. So I am careful not to come to a premature conclusion because you only need one disproof to undermine a hypothesis. That's what I'm trying to stay away from. I have my private thoughts about what I think is going on, and some of them I'm very, very sure about. I'm open to being wrong, except most of the time I know I'm probably right. I don't know what he's probably right about. I would love to know specifically what he's talking about. Like, what are we dealing with the phenomena? What are we dealing with percentage-wise black tech versus the phenomena? You also analyzed, so now he's talking about the UAP fragments. And he says, you've probably heard of Jacques Vallée, Kit Green, Eric Davis, and Colm Kelleher. That is the grand finale of fireworks. As the dog is shivering somewhere, all roads lead to those guys. That's why it's like, and I said this before, it's the reason you keep hearing their names come up is because it's such a small pool of scientists who are willing to openly talk about this stuff. Yeah, there are people who work behind the scenes, but we don't know their names. So the people who do have the guts to come out and speak about this, those are the names you see over and over and over again. It's not like people are like it's some conspiracy. This small group it's a big conspiracy and they're trying to trick us about UAP and UFOs. And Garry says all roads lead to them when it comes to UAP. I basically became friends with that whole group. They call it the Invisible College. and I'm sure there are more people we don't know about. When they found out some of the instruments that I had developed using mass spectrometry, they asked if I could analyze UAP material and tell them something about it. That led to the development of a roadmap of how to analyze these things. And that's what the paper is about, how to analyze. Going forward, it was a very I'm trying to think of the word. It wasn't a very exciting sample they tested for the used for the paper. It had some parts that were like, oh, it's a little different here and there, but nothing. Some of the other samples are more promising, and so that was the first paper, and I think they went conservative on purpose. Get people reading that, and that's an old picture of some of the Invisible College folks. Douglas Price Williams, don't know him. David Saunders, I don't know him. Leo Sprinkle, I do know Sprinkle, I know that name. Dick Henry, don't know him. Jacques Vallée, J. Hallen Hynek, Claude Poor, and Fred Beckman. That's before my time, a lot of these people. Some of the objects are nondescript, talking about the metal. Most of them, there's nothing unusual about them, except everywhere you look at the metal, the composition is different. This is probably my favorite stuff, what he says here. It's odd. He goes, it's what we call inhomogeneous. So basically, it's not uniform throughout. It's a fancy way of saying incompletely mixed. The common thing about all the materials that I've looked at so far, and there's about a dozen, is that almost none of them are uniform. They're all these hodgepodge mixtures. Each individual case will be composed of a similar set of elements, but they will be inhomogeneous. And I think those are the Ubatuba Brazil samples. Yes, very tiny. One of the materials from the so-called Ubatuba event has extraordinarily altered isotope ratios of magnesium. It was interesting because another piece from the same event was analyzed in the same instrument at the same time. This is an extraordinary sensitive instrument called a nanosims, secondary ion mass spectrometer. It had perfectly correct isotope ratios for what you would expect for magnesium found anywhere on Earth. Meanwhile, the other one was just way off, like 30% off the ratios. The problem is there's no good reason humans have for altering the isotope ratios of a simple metal like magnesium. There's no different properties to the different isotopes that anybody, at least in any of the literature that is public of the hundreds of thousands of papers published, that says this is why you would do that. Now, you can do it. It's a little expensive to do, but you'd have no reason for doing it. I mean, let's think about what people use isotopes for today. Most of the time, humans use isotopes to blow stuff up, uranium or plutonium or some poison, or poison someone, or used as a tracer in order to kill cancer. But those are very, very specific cases. We are almost always using radioactive isotopes. We don't ever change the isotope ratios or stable isotopes except perhaps as a tracer. What that means is that if you find a metal where the isotope ratios are changed far beyond what is normally found in nature, then that material has likely been engineered. The material is downstream of a process that caused them to be altered. Someone did it. The questions are who and why? And I believe this is the Linda Moulton Howe sample, if I'm correct. No, it's another Ubatuba sample. That's another Ubatuba sample. Might be the same one at a different angle. So now let's look at what these materials are claimed to be. In almost every case, these are the leftovers of some sort of process that these objects spit out. So you go look at the cases where molten metal falls from these objects. Why would 30 pounds of a molten metal fall from a flying object? Yeah, that's how heavy some of this stuff is. The case that he put in the paper, it was like molten metal and it was flowing down the road. I didn't see any great pictures of that. There was a link, but it didn't work in the paper. What are the circumstances in some of these cases? For instance, in some cases, the witnesses state that the observed objects appeared unstable. So the UFO is wobbling. Oh my god, it's about to crash. And then it spits out a bunch of stuff. In the video interview, he's like, so it spits out some stuff. And now all of a sudden, the UFO is stable again. And then it moves off. So it appears like it fixed itself. One hypothesis would be that the material it offloads is part of the mechanism the object uses for moving around, so related to the propulsion system. And when things get out of whack, the object has to offload it, which is really interesting if that's true. It just drops this stuff to the ground and kind of like the exhaust. Sorry if that lands on your head. Uh, that begs the question again, assuming the things are real at all. What are they using it for? If there's altered isotope ratios, are they using the altered isotope ratios? Are the altered ratios the result of the propulsion mechanism? Again, pure speculation. When the ratios get that far out of whack, do they have to offload because it's no longer useful in propulsion? Smarter people than me will come up with better reasons, but this is the fun of the science. The data is there, the explanation is not. Any other questions you can find in metal repair? It seems like I don't know if it's metal repair, but if that's what's going on, it's like maybe the mix of whatever it's using, the chemicals needs to be re reformed, and they need to get rid of the excess garbage. I don't know. That is influencing the propulsion system. That's kind of cool if that's what's going on, but I don't know if that's going on. Leftovers from phasing fields being discharged. Well, hopefully one day we find out. I'm not smart enough to even understand that. How many objects have you checked out that are not playing by our rules? Talking about the materials. So of the 10 or 12 I've looked at, 2 seem to be not playing by our rules. That doesn't mean that they're levitating on my desk. It just means that they have altered isotope ratios. Now we get into stuff that I don't understand half of what they're talking about. Have you ever used a super quantum interference device? We will likely be using squids and a new device that can determine the atomic structure of anything at a sub angstrom resolution, which tells me going forward, the technology is amazing. So we'll get, hopefully, I don't know if we'll get an answer, but we'll get more detail. There's no device in the world that can do that today, especially of an amorphous object. We can do crystals, we can do little bits of biology with what's called cryo EM, but this device supersedes all of them. So I'm talking with the government about building that. We need funding, damn it. Which we still don't know what funding is going to come from the Gillibrand Amendment, the UFO office when it gets signed. We don't know how much funding it's going to get. Are the devices and methods that you have available to you in terms of being able to analyze this material sufficient? In a perfect world, what would you want to see? Depending on how deep you want to go, each analysis costs anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. That tells you what the atoms are, what the isotope ratios are, crystalline quality, a lot of things that are sort of standard materials analysis. The point of doing this, though, is to figure out what it is used for. To do that, eventually you need to get down to the atomic level. Let's say we didn't have transistors today and one of these objects dropped a big chunk of germanium doped with other elements, or these little transistors. We would not have a clue as to the function, and we would ask, why would anyone put arrays of germanium with these strange impurities in them? What is this thing? But we do have transistors and we do understand. But he's saying in a world, if we didn't have transistors, we wouldn't understand. Just like whatever this thing is, we don't understand how it's built, so we don't understand what the hell we're seeing. And I talked about on Twitter that, and this is really stretching it possibly, that this thing is putting off, it's pretending to be something. And maybe part of the pretending to make us think they're aliens is, showing itself, wobbling and then spitting out some material just to distract us. I don't know why, if that's part of it. There are people who think, I think it's Ray Boucher thinks that UFOs hang around nuclear missiles because they want to make us think they're extraterrestrials, but in reality, they're demons. I don't think he says demons, but that's what he's getting at. They're just being deceptive, just making themselves appear to be something that they're not for whatever reason. Anybody who's engineering materials these days for doing any kind of advanced electronics and photonics understands that where the atoms are in the structure matters. There's a thing that's often used in biology called the structure function relationship. This is a little boring. I'm going to link to this. People want to read all of it. Talking about the function of something like, you know, so sometimes you could just see the structure and you understand the function. If I look at a heart and watch it a little bit, how it moves, I can understand its function. I can look at the tubes in your veins and say the function is to carry blood. As we're looking at the structure of cells, when we see the structure of a protein, we can get a sense of how it's operating. So that's really what it's about. The next frontier of materials study is atomic. If you want to understand something very advanced, you better have something like this in your back pocket. So that is that article. And I will stop sharing in a second. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I need to go. I have the transcript. I just got to find it on my laptop. And if I can get actually over to my. Here we go. Flaking from contaminants and phasing field containment. Inside the field, the temperatures are very high. When the phasing field is discharged, the contaminants and high potentials are radiated out. Maybe. I don't know. Fuel printing as needs. Leading to some of the radiation effects seen in victims who walk up to the EAPs. Yeah, I think it was Keel believes it's not the technology, it's more of what the object is made of, and he thinks it's all made of electromagnetic and it's formed out of nothing. Um, I don't know if he's right about that. Basically, whatever this intelligence is can create whatever it wants, and in that process, in certain times, I think he says when it's landing, it's more dangerous. I have to. I've tweeted that whole section out. I don't remember exactly what he says. Have a good night, Pix. Everybody have a good week. I'm only halfway done. Um, I understand if people are getting bored, and I will stop sharing that. I'm going to take a 2-minute break. I will be right back. Right So this is the video interview he did. I transcribed. And that's a quote from him that goes on later on. To have a group of scientists who are supposedly to be leading thinkers debase people who are interested in thinking about new ideas is, to me, that's heretical. Basically, yeah, you come up with some idea that's thinking outside the box and people criticize you. Kind of like when people make fun of Eric Davis's paper on teleportation for the Air Force, for the Air Force, right? Um, and the paper he wrote on wormholes, and it's like, I think it was the Drive. They wrote an article back then when the Dirge came out saying Eric Davis, this is junk science. This dirt is junk science. I'm like, give me a break. How the hell do you know? Because they're brilliant astrophysicists thinking outside of the box. We need more people like that. This was his interview. It came out, which was in the same article. Let me put this up full screen. All right. David Haith made the interview, and I juiced it up a little bit, added a lot of links. It's Nolan Lab with the Breaking Bad letters. Starts out talking about his original interest. Screen grab from the interview. He talked about he read science fiction, Ian Banks, Arthur C. Clarke, who wrote 2001 Space Odyssey. And then I have some stuff in this transcript that's different than the actual interview. I added some stuff which made it longer, but the host Jesse says, right, that's his name. Sure, before I go along, Jesse Michaels. So Jesse, um, talking about the monolith, and Jesse says, kind of like the sort of thing placed on Earth that inspires tech innovation. Like John Mack would talk about a lot of these alien sightings being slightly more advanced but barely comprehensible tech for the time, also inspiring tech innovation. Nolan's like, yeah, it's like laying breadcrumbs in a direction. He talks about the areas of microbiology he's interested in, cancer research, and he says the National Cancer Institute is one of the biggest institutes in the country for doling out money. So you follow the money. And if there's no money for doing this research, there's no positive feedback for doing it. And if anything, negative feedback. And then the science just doesn't advance. And as I wrote in this, that's what Jeffrey, not Jeffrey, the guy who wrote the book with Whitley Strieber, The Supernatural, Jeff Kripal said, that's the main problem with ufology and all these subjects. There's no funding, so we have to change that. It's great with the Gillibrand thing, but we need private funding too to do this private research. Massive funding. I think John Alexander says billions of dollars, and yeah, it's like a pretty big problem to try to understand. And Nolan says science, in its essence, and scientists are capitalists. Most of the biology scientists in the country have some relationship to studying cancer. Why? Because of the money. I just read that. Sorry. And he talks about Jesse talks about ATIP and the $22 million, and I note that it was OSAP that got the $22 million, and compare $22 million for OSAP and the budget for a fighter jet often exceeds 100 billion for the fighter jet budgets for all the fighter jets. That budget exceeds $100 billion. My God, that's just ugh. In other words, discovering extraterrestrial life and even propulsion that could be stepwise better than what we currently have gets less than 1% of the current F-35 budget. And then I show that I mentioned that Kripal brought up funding and how that's such a big problem, why we're not making progress. At least publicly, whatever's going on privately, whatever progress they've made, we don't know about. So unless we get access to that, it's not helping us. He talks about the CIA coming to his office again, and he brings up Bigelow, Kelleher, Putoff, and Davis, and the MRIs. And he says, mentions up the caudate putamen, and there's my public picture that is royalty free of the caudate nucleus and the putamen in the basal ganglia area of the brain. You ask a question. What's unique about these individuals, the ones that they were studying? They're all highly functioning. You have to make snap decisions. And so what is that? That's intuition. One way to explain it, you have to make snap decisions. And so what is that? That's intuition. And I'm repeating, I'm sorry. One way to explain it would be intuition or just highly intelligent. And then surprisingly, when we look at the family members, we found that the family members had it, which is fascinating. So that means that structure had a genetic component, whatever it is. So that bundle of nerve, the neurons, that 10, 5, 10, 15 times more than normal, that happens in the family members too. So Jesse asks, you have a genetic or phenotypic relating to the observable characteristics of an individual resulting from the interaction of its genotype with the environment. Do you have a genetic or phenotypic predisposition to seeing the UFOs, or post contact? Do you now have a more neuronally dense caudate nucleus and putamen and more psychic? No, I don't think it's changed. They're just able to, as you say, see it. In other words, he's saying he doesn't think it's changed from their encounter with these objects. He thinks these people are just able to see it. They're able to recognize it for what it might be and not dismiss it. So maybe it's allowing us to kind of widen the doors of our normal limited scope of perception. Nolan says, right. You're seeing these UFOs that exist kind of interstitially in reality that other people just can't see. Nolan says our senses are to filter to stop our brains from being overwhelmed with reality. And so that what we see is a limited aspect of everything around us. Let's get a little bit of this. I'll put this up in the next couple of days. I don't know whether it's an antenna or anything like that. It just allows us to interpret things better, right? So, for instance, there's a form of Japanese chess, which he spoke about in the other interview, and they measure the folks who play this shogi, the masters. And when they make an unexpected, brilliant move, that area of the brain lights up, the caudate putamen, which is that. An old article I found on that. That's an old, yeah, about the shogi players. I'm not sure exactly how old. I'll have to look that up. I find that fascinating. We're actually working on using both autism and schizophrenics because this area of the brain in both autism and schizophrenia can be damaged. But if you think a little bit about it, schizophrenics hear things and see things that nobody else sees. So are they all crazy? So I don't know what is he saying there. Are some schizophrenics hearing stuff that actually is existing outside of the realm of what normal people can hear or see? I think it's more like here, and it's something really in another dimension. I don't know exactly what he's seeing there. So Jesse says, well, that goes into the transmission theory. I think schizophrenics it's like a transmitter being broken or oscillating between different frequencies. They can't turn it off. He's like, yep, they can't turn it off. And then he goes into the materials, UFO materials, and Valet, how Valet, he helped develop a computerized map of Mars while he was at NASA a long time ago, and developed one of the earlier versions of the internet called ARPANET. He's also the inspiration for the French scientist played by Francois Truffaut in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I saw in the theater in '77, which was one of my favorite movies. And he goes into his narration of Valet and other ufologists. And they talk about what is different about these samples that they were looking at. And he goes into Ubatuba. It was September of '57. Mirror Beach, the disc plunged and then it rose again and exploded. highly pure magnesium over 99.8%. And Valet interviewed the doctor who did the analysis. It was also confirmed by Dr. Sturrock, Peter Sturrock of Stanford, who convened a panel in 98. And there were articles, if you look up the Peter Sturrock 1998, I posted some of the articles. They had a group of scientists looking at UFOs, and they said in the end, well, we can't say they're extraterrestrial. We just believe it deserves more study. He wrote an entire book on some of his findings, Sturrock. I forget what it's called, the UFO Enigma, maybe. And Ubatuba had multiple samples available, first-hand reports of analysis. And Nolan says it turned out the magnesium in the Ubatuba sample was an extremely high level of purity, but that's strange because magnesium burns like hell. So obviously it had something else in it. So yeah, we did a mass spectrometry analysis of some of these pieces with a highly sensitive instrument. It's over in the engineering department called a nanosims. It's a secondary ion mass spectrometer, as it's called, and that's the machine. And basically, what it determines not just the elements by their mass, but also the isotopes by their mass. And one of them was anomalous. The magnesium ratios were way off. I mean, not even close to being natural. It's interesting, right? So you would never find this in naturally occurring. You would never find it in nature. And you'd need some sort of centrifuge or something to create that isotope ratio. Yes. Would that be possible? Oh, it's possible. It's just expensive beyond. He's like, well, most people don't have access to a centrifuge. And Nolan's like, especially when these things were found, back in the 50s, 60s, talk about beyond expensive. And then the question is, why would you even do that? What's the motivation? Is it something they're using and they need the ratio to accomplish something? Or is it a byproduct of an effect that where they take the natural things and then they're doing something and this ends up being the outcome? And then when they're done with it, they go, and then they throw it out, right? He made those noises. Whether or not these objects are trying to show us something or they don't care, we see this happening and that maybe that tells you something. You can sort of reverse engineer from first principles, maybe what it is. Nobody that I know has figured it out. And he talks about the five observables, um, Nimitz and Fravor. This is interesting. Jesse's like, why isn't the government immediately funding this research? I mean, it feels insane. And Nolan's like, you tell me. I mean, maybe they have done it. Maybe the stuff that we have, somebody is sitting around saying laughably, they're wasting their time on exhaust. We have the engine. And I do think somebody has the engine, but I don't think the government knows that. Like we've talked about in a special access program, the people who have access to that or even knowledge of that is a very small amount of people, including Christopher Mellon, who did not know about that until he was briefed into how those programs are hidden and where to look. And now when you hear him talk, he's more open-minded. If you look at his old interviews, it's a different story. Somewhere between the older interview and the recent interviews, somebody had a conversation with him. I'm not speculating there. That's what I was told. Can't prove that. I'm just telling you that's what I was told. If something came from the Andromeda galaxy and it's a million years ahead of us and it lands on Earth, it has technologies that we don't understand. And then Jesse's like, some think aliens might be us from the future. And Nolan was like, yeah. And if you think about the way we're evolving, Jesse says, I should have made it clearer who was saying what because I know people. I'm going to try to make this into an audio podcast, and I have to remember that. It sucks for the people watching, but I will remember that going forward. And I'm still working on getting these onto a podcast. I have to figure out how to do that. I know it's not that hard, but some of them you have to pay $25 a month, and I'll figure it out. If you think about the way we're evolving, it's probably, talking about grays, it's probably smaller bodies, bigger heads. And Nolan's like, yeah. Jesse's like, sort of what you would see a gray alien look like. Nolan's like, yeah, I've always been interested in the 5% I don't know. I'll publish the 95% I do know, but I'm always interested in the stuff that I can't explain because almost every major discovery has been somebody looking at the anomalous data and then constructing a new theory of reality, right? And that's Thomas Kuhn, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. The notion that almost every scientific revolution was fought tooth and nail by the more conservative skeptics saying, you can't possibly be right. And Thomas Kuhn was friends with John Mack. This is Jesse now saying this. That was Nolan. Jesse goes, and Thomas Kuhn was friends with John Mack, who was the head of the Harvard Psychiatry Department, who spent the latter part of his career studying alien abductions. And Nolan says about Kuhn being friends with Mack, Nolan says, I didn't know that. Jesse says, yeah, and he encouraged him to do the study. Nolan says, cool. Well, that's interesting. I'm going to use that in my talks. Jesse says, you should. Nolan says, I think that's where we're at right now. The preponderance of evidence now and the Department of Defense admitting that these things are real, that the data is real. There's no conclusions, but the data is real. So this is what I added. I went back and found this, the Mack Kuhn connection, Thomas Kuhn, in a 1996 interview with David J. Brown. David J. Brown says, could you say something about your interaction with Thomas Kuhn regarding your approach to researching the abduction phenomenon? This is 1996. John Mack says, I knew Thomas Kuhn as a child because our parents were friends. I used to go there every Christmas for eggnog and liver pate. When I started doing this work, I went to see him and he was interested. He cautioned me in various ways. He advised me to just collect data, to try to suspend judgment and look out for the traps of language like real, unreal, exists, doesn't exist, happened, didn't happen, intrapsychic, outside. He advised me to just report, to record what people were feeling and saying. And that's what I've tried to do. Matt continues. The other thing that Kuhn said was, don't worry about science, because in this culture, science has become a new kind of theology. What you're really interested in, he said, is trying to learn something and gain knowledge, whether it'll satisfy science or not. Science prefers to study primarily within the purely material world, he said, but don't worry about that. Now, the other thing he said was to just publish in scientific journals and don't write a book. This was because he had gotten so much intense interest and flack around his book that sometimes he was troubled about it. He's kind of a shy man. Brown says his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, has become standard introductory reading in virtually every history of science course in the world. Mack's like, in some ways, he seems to lament the reception of his book. I don't think he's right that he did. His book, as with any popularization of any important and complex concept, is going to be misunderstood by a lot of people who are going to want to cloak themselves in his mantle. But I think that if you have something you want to say, it's okay to do it in a book. Brown, why did you write Abduction? Mack, I didn't take his advice on that one, and I did write a book. First of all, I couldn't get what I had to say down in an article because it's too complex, and the cases were too elaborate. I wanted to lay out a kind of map of the whole phenomenon as best I could from what I experienced. I thought it was important, regardless of whether these beings are to be taken literally as material entities or whether there's something more complex and subtle that crosses over from the unseen into the material world. Whatever it is, demonic or material reality, it seemed to me important and a big story that I wanted to report. So that's what I did. That was the only clip in that Mac interview, which I linked to in that blog that talked about Thomas Kuhn. I'm just looking at Annie, if there's any questions. UFO poo, exactly. Put a diaper on that UFO, damn it. I think we need a shirt. UFO poo. Probably the craft we see in our skies and over our oceans every day. Why spend money on Nolan? I don't know why you're asking that. There's not a lot of people actually willing to even talk about this subject, let alone have a passion for it. We're not alone, and I'll read this for people listening. Sorry. We're not alone on this planet. Several highly advanced species live in our oceans. How is that not obvious by now? Not obvious to me. Um, I think something here is interacting with us, and the ocean theory is very plausible as we see stuff coming out of the oceans. I don't know if they live there. Um, I don't know. I know people report seeing that. And I don't think that's human technology. Yeah, don't know. Oh, well, sorry. I will read the comments for people listening. Wake up, folks. Our military has been in a cat and mouse game with our underwater neighbors for many years, starting with Operation High Jump and Admiral Byrd, which is very controversial. You're being brainwashed to believe they're visiting. They may be from here. Yeah, you never see that brought up. It's very rare. I don't think I've seen it in any mainstream article saying the possibility remains that we're dealing with an intelligence that is native to the planet Earth, and they may be more intelligent than us and may be higher than us on the food chain. The cyclotron was one of the earliest types of and I'm reading comments again, earliest types of particle accelerators, and is still used as the first stage of some large multi-stage particle accelerators. And UFO Video Addict says, if you saw your neighbors walking in and out of their homes every single day, would you assume they're just visiting? No. All right. He talks about the theory. Jesse says the theory he likes best is the Vallée-Pascal theory. That 1947, the Roswell crash represents the dividing line, and before that, people were seeing angels, demons, leprechauns, fairies, whatever the local contemporary lore of where the sighting took place was. I don't know if before that, because we have Lou talking about the 1930s and a crash related to Mussolini. We have the 45 crash near Trinity. So, but still, you could still base it around modern day. In the old days, yes, maybe the fairies and demons and leprechauns are the aliens of today. I don't know. Maybe. Um, And then later, aliens became something in the zeitgeist. This is Jesse. That's what people started to see. But you're seeing some sort of kind of proto architecture of a thing that involves beings and crafts. And then you're recollecting it in this way that is comprehensible to you, given kind of like the noble myth or the myth of the time. Nolan says, right. I use the example of, let's say there's a race of intelligent ants out in your garden. They don't have a clue what's going up in the kitchen, right? They couldn't understand it if they wanted to, and neither could you understand what their communications are. How do you talk to them? Well, the first thing you would probably do is make a little thing that looks like an ant and put it there and have it do something. And so maybe that's what it is. And that's what I'm talking about earlier. So maybe what we see is a gray or whatever type of beings. It's just their way of communicating with us, because that's how we communicate, by seeing a being. Maybe we're not dealing with beings. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's AI. Maybe it's something totally non-physical, but can take physical form if it needs to. And so maybe that, and back to Nolan. And so maybe that's what it is. I mean, alien means alien, right? I mean, it's so far different from us that it's doing its best to talk to us in ways that it can do. They're either from another planet in this galaxy or elsewhere, underground or nearby or whatever, and they just show up to look at us, and because they're basically maybe looking at their past, or interdimensional, and they're from another level of reality that we don't understand. All speculation, but fun. You can run your mind down these possibilities and realize how much bigger a universe you live in than what you're dealing with day to day. And of course, the skeptics will say that's why these people make this up, because their day to day lives are so boring. They need to fantasize about UFOs, which is bullshit. He's just talking about the different theories. It's a real phenomenon. Nobody's fantasizing about that. We have the data, we have the sightings for decades and decades. As far as what it is, yes, speculation. To have a group of scientists who are supposed to be leading thinkers debase people who are interested in thinking about new ideas is, to me, that's heretical. That was Nolan. And then they talk about the Fermi paradox. Jesse brings this up. Basically, if aliens are, if there are aliens in the solar system or in this universe, where are they? They should be here. That's the Fermi paradox. They're not here, so what's the deal? Um, Splitting the atom. So he says, yeah, it feels like it's gotten worse in terms of established scientists as far as making fun of people who look into UFOs and other stuff. Talk about the Fermi paradox, which is the mental model question of like, why don't we see aliens? He's the guy that created the underpinnings for splitting the atom. He was in the Manhattan Project, sort of as conventionally well regarded as it gets. And he was thinking about aliens in his time off at Los Alamos. So it's like, why can't we do that? Nolan's like, when your mind expands to a certain point in terms of what you might consider reality to be, other entities live there. And Jesse goes, so this should be the rallying cry to anybody watching on the financing front. Is there any way we can? And he jumps in. He goes, is there any way we can see the materials? He says, Nolan's like, I have some in a locked bank account. And Jesse laughs. And Nolan says, no, honestly, I don't have it hanging around here. I can do a video for you and send it. And then the video cuts to 1 week later, where Nolan apparently went to his bank account and pulled out the UFO parts that are allegedly from possible UFO crashes. Um, that's some of it from the video that I showed earlier. And he says these are small, and then he goes, the three facts: observers with real, this is Jesse, observers with no real monetary incentive to lie claimed to see a vehicle that broke the bounds of our current understanding of aerospace limitations. Two, the materials contain isotope ratios that do not exist naturally on Earth. Three, a top Stanford microbiologist isn't ruling out the fact that these parts could be of extraterrestrial origin. So yeah, they're small. He says, but these should get you excited. And Nolan says, once again, he goes into the isotopes, how one piece is normal, then the other piece, we're talking about Ubatuba, that came from the same event, has exactly the correct one has the correct isotopes, and the other one is totally different. He says it's kind of like if you were to take a chocolate ice cream and vanilla ice cream. This is Nolan, and then just do a little bit of a swirl. You could see a mixture, and we call that inhomogeneous. Why would you mix some of these elements? That's actually, again, no good reason. There's no good reason. There's no metal that people normally make that have some of the mixtures that we've seen. So that's interesting. And then we talk about Ubatuba. You know, this goes really long, and I'm not going to go through all this. I'm going to go back to my Twitter and see if there's anything else I want to share. Talk about Hal Putoff, and they talk about. Oh yeah, I'll just read the Putoff stuff. So Putoff calls in, and hi Hal. They talk about this one sample, which is the sample that Linda Moulton Howe had. She sold to TTSA. I don't know if it was one or more samples. Originally, it was given to Art Bell. They were called Art's Parts. Then it went to Linda Moulton Howe. And then TTSA got a hold of it for $35,000. And Nolan has some of those pieces, or Hal Putoff has some of those pieces and maybe loaned them to Nolan. And Hal calls in and says the initial story that it was sent anonymously by someone claiming to be an Army officer. And then Putoff says, and then written in the diary was that it was a piece from Roswell. It turns out that it reduces this piece reduces the size of the required microwavable guide for terahertz frequencies down to about 1/30th of the wavelength, which is amazing. So it means you can basically, and I think he says 1/20th in other interviews. So basically it means you can put 30 waveguides in the volume of a single waveguide at terahertz frequencies. And that was it. It was really quick. And then I go into the whole Putoff lecture where he talks in great detail about the metamaterials. And I am going to go to some of my Twitter in a second. Let me see if I can pull this up because I am getting a little tired. Let's see. I could pull up some of the. This is some of the stuff that Nolan said that you don't really get to see. So the Signal tweeted out the link to the interview that I'm reading to you right now, the transcript. And the headline said Stanford professor claims to have real UFO parts. Nolan's like, I don't recall ever going that far. I have materials given to me with interesting claimed histories and reasonable chains of custody. No matter what, anything needs verification and validation, and not just by me. Science needs to be reproducible. But I do appreciate the interest, and I wouldn't be talking about it if I didn't think it was worth discussion and reasoned speculation. Somebody says, I keep hearing about items being found with isotopes from a different solar system. No one ever said that. Sounds conclusive, but nothing ever comes of it. Do we need a big name behind the analysis, like a Harvard professor? It's like we have a Stanford professor. Well, I think Nolan is not a big name among everyday people, but he's got the gravitas and should be getting a lot more exposure. Hopefully that comes soon. Nolan says there's no proof that this stuff is from elsewhere, just data that suggests, not proves, that the ratios were engineered. Could have been engineered by some company, not impossible, just no currently practical reason to do that can be found in the literature. Thanks, Garry, for giving this research the attention it needs. If I comprehended the Vice article accurately, there are currently, and I'll try to remember people listening. I'm trying to make it obvious who's saying what. These are tweets, folks. These are tweets and replies from Nolan on Twitter. If I comprehend the Vice article accurately, there are currently at least two pieces that remain special or unknown. The other 10 out of the 12 are more mundane. And Nolan says, mundane insofar as anyone with a smelter and semi purified metals could create, while interesting, worth cataloging, resource money to do detailed study is lacking. The claimed circumstances around the materials are interesting, but can and will always be dismissible as hearsay. And this is Tim Staley saying, Mr. Nolan, when you talk about use case or structural function of these materials, how do you begin eliminating possibilities? Is there a composition? Is there a comparison you can provide for context? Nolan, often you start with lists of available metals and their constituents available commercially. The lists are hard to collate and always incomplete, as you suggest in preparing an analysis. The control is as important as the real experiment. Always be wary of fooling yourself. Okay, and okay. It's interesting that it's still a blend. Talking about one of the samples. Do you know enough about magnesium cycles to know if this ratio of isotopes would be expected in other systems besides ours? He's talking about off planet. Nolan goes, it's always possible some other stellar process could create it, but then you have to explain how one shard from the same alleged sample has normal ratios and the other does not. Jameson Way, do you believe they were manipulated on purpose or a result of some natural occurrence? And by the way, if people didn't see a reason to get on Twitter before, this should be an example of why you should be on Twitter. And like I said, you can follow a very small amount of people and you won't get the crap that you hear about. I don't get a lot of crap in my Twitter personally. Sometimes I dole it out. If we go through all of my tweets, you'll see some of that. But Nolan, you very rarely see it on Nolan. You could follow Lou, Nolan, Mellon. So, do you believe that these samples, the mixtures, were manipulated on purpose, the elements, or as a result of some natural occurrence? What would be the advantage of doing this? Nolan says, "Great questions, exactly the right ones. All I'm doing right now is giving the data so that others might have questions, might have answers I do not." Mark Coffey says, I'm not querying Dr. Nolan's credentials, but all he has shown is that some materials he has examined display unusual properties. This doesn't necessarily lead to the conclusion that this is extraterrestrial technology. Nolan, you are right. I never said it did or proved it did. The point being, produce the data and share it. Many cases still lack an explanation. I'm looking at vetted cases that still, to date, prove nothing except that the data doesn't add up to a proof of anything. Oh, let's see. Kevin, thanks for your response. As a follow up, how would, I'll read the first response. Maybe not. Connor, is there anything other than the Connor asks, is there anything other than the ratios that make these things interesting? And Nolan's like, just the claimed circumstances around them. I try to work with vetted cases that have witnesses and claimed evidence, hopefully shows people that proof and conclusions are hard, but we can put through peer review and published, better for people to work with data than opinions. And then Kevin says, as a follow-up, how would one make a material with such an unusual isotope ratio? Nolan says there are kinds of centrifuges or gas filtration devices that can separate based on mass, concentrate isotopes of different weights that weigh, siphon off a layer, then mix purified layers to get a ratio you want. Purifying to 99% or even 90% for a given mass can get expensive. I'm going to read all of these questions and responses, and then I'm going to save my Twitter for tomorrow, hopefully. That Grant Cameron, and I knew this was a problem when he said it. Grant Cameron says Garry Nolan pieces from Garry Nolan pieces from same anomalous event. This is Grant Cameron showing two pieces of samples. One has isotopes not found on Earth. The second piece has normal isotopes. The aliens must be smiling. Say, wow. And by the way, wow is Grant Cameron's theory that whatever they show us, it's them trying to get our attention, saying, look at us. And we respond by saying, wow. And I knew this, Grant was jumping the line there, and Garry jumped in and said, subtle point, but it's not isotopes not found on Earth. It's magnesium isotopes that are not a naturally found mixture. And he goes to the mixture of the different isotopes, how it compares to a normal magnesium. He said two shards of the material were way off of what you would expect, not just decimal points off. Done on a nanosims, accurate to parts per billion. So yeah, it doesn't mean it's alien, but somebody did something to get it to that, and we don't know who it was, and we don't know why. So that's the question. Let's see. Oh no. My computer is frozen. I'm not sure if anybody can hear me right now. Come on. Let's see. You were still live, but the audience has fallen asleep. Hey, I appreciate that. Let's see. Share. Oh, shoot. Computer's freezing up. Well, I can't do anything with the frozen computer, unfortunately. Let's see. I guess I'll call it quits. I'll try one more time. If I can get this to share. Nope. I'll try one more time. Computer's freezing up. Um, Back to the Nolan stuff. Like I said, if you're bored, I don't mind people leaving. I get it. Let's see. And somebody said Gary is the greatest of all time. He said, "Why am I the greatest of all time? I thought I was the sacrificial lamb." Oh, he is, especially when people are ignoring his work, especially in the UFO community. I expect they're mainstream, but there's people in the UFO community who are like, "Yeah, this is nothing." The problem is people have expectations that, this is going to happen so fast and we're going to get disclosure, the full story. No, it's going to take a long time, and steps like this are important. People really need to start getting over this. Oh, it's going to happen by the end of the year. And it's like, you're going to continually be disappointed and bored with stuff like this. If you're expecting the most exciting stuff, and, oh, they're going to tell us they're time travelers. It's going to happen any day now, and reptilians. Nope. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but it's a slow and long process. This has been going on for a long time. I don't know if I'm going to ever see any more disclosure of what we're dealing with in my lifetime where we get answers. I hope it happens. I hope it happens next month, but it's a slow process. That's why you see people drop out. New people who are new to this, they think this is normal to be getting all this new stuff, and especially people who got in 2017, they've dropped off or they've become total debunkers, talking about how this is, you know, we're dealing with drones. All of this is drones. Um, so anyway, somebody says, except for the part about it being all about science, science is helpful, but this topic covers much more, and much of Valet's thinking isn't strictly scientific, but often philosophical. And Nolan says, oh, don't worry, I follow all these other areas, but there are plenty of others who speak it better than I do. I fully agree. Today's science can't explain it all. So that's why I stick to where I am reasonably credentialed. Kilsharu said, are UFOs a result of technology or spirituality? UFO Twitter seems to be divided. Personally, I believe two options are mutually exclusive. What are your thoughts? Nolan said, Arthur C. Clarke, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And by the way, I'm not sure if UFO Twitter is split between technology and spirituality. I think you're talking about nuts and bolts and something that's non-physical. That's, there's a divide with that, and people don't want to get into the non-physical aspect of it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's spiritual. Just because something's non-physical or something that's residing outside of the electromagnetic spectrum that we can't see it, that doesn't mean it's spiritual whatsoever. Although there is an aspect that is spiritual and metaphysical, yes, and that's another step up, but I don't think that's where the major divide comes in. Back on. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my computer. If it cuts off, let me know. And that's I'm trying to think. That's COVID because he worked on COVID, so he does not put up with anti-vax stuff. I think that's it. All right, I'll do my own tweets tomorrow. I know I appreciate there's 23 people. That's 23 more than I expected to be here at this time of the night on a Saturday. So if you have any questions, go for it now. Anything you want, feel free. No holds barred. That is my Twitter. Anything? People awake? Should I start singing Star Wars like Bill Murray? All right, I'll end it. Um, I'm still feeling my way on how to do this. I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it. Some people love it, some people don't like it. Um, anyway, all right. People fall asleep. They're snoring as I put them into a nice dreamlike state. And that's your UFO Twitter, Garry Nolan Vice update for the evening. Yeah, good question. Like I said earlier, I wouldn't say an assessment. I'd say my favorite speculation of what we're dealing with is something, at least one aspect of it, something that is native to this planet that is not physical but can become physical, and it communicates with us by sometimes becoming physical, whether it's a UFO or or a gray or a mantid being or a reptilian. But that's just a speculation. I mean, we could be dealing with extraterrestrials. I mean, I had somebody tell me a couple of years ago we were dealing with all kinds of different things. The one thing that we knew about the least was extraterrestrials. Everything else was interdimensional and relative, like cousins, relatives of ours, and time travel was involved. So, you know, Eric Davis talks about how he believes they're definitely coming here using other dimensions, but doesn't know if they're extraterrestrial or part of this planet. So people like that don't know. I spoke to somebody who said the evidence is so contradictory because I said, is it one intelligence pretending to be multiple things, or is it really multiple intelligences here? And they said, don't know. Evidence is contradictory. In short, in plain English, it's a shit show. Brilliant person told me that. So that's my, and that's, I don't know. I really don't know. And I hate people that tell me they know. It's like, all right, sorry, I don't know. Edward Roman, and by the way, I don't need to read. Edward Roman asks, humans have no chance against the phenomenon. The government will sell us a war and we'll get completely destroyed. Yeah, I don't know how the government's going to handle this. I don't. It's definitely worrisome how they're going to handle it. I want to. Yeah, tomorrow I'll do some of my Twitter. There's some decent videos I pulled up. I pulled up a clip from Hunt for the Skinwalker, which I need to watch again. Now that OSEP came out, and OSEP wasn't about Skinwalker Ranch. It was partly about the ranch, but it was the whole area around the ranch and other areas around the country. And they planned on investigating other hotspots around the world. So that is it. Unless you ask any more questions, it was how long? 2.5 hours. I'm very curious to see the feedback on this one. People like this stuff, but some people are bored to tears, which I understand. And other people just want interviews. And it's like, I can do nothing but interviews, but it's like everybody's doing interviews. Every podcast has an interview. I can do the same thing. Maybe I can ask a couple of better questions, but it's like my valet, I mean, my Kelleher Green interview, not Green, Kelleher and Knapp interview. I thought that Whitley Strieber's interview was better. Andy did a great job. So it's like, I don't know. I got to figure it out. Anyway, yes. Good night, Edward. Good night, everybody. If you're already sleeping, sweet dreams. I think I'll be back tomorrow just to go over my tweets. And then I start a new job a 9-day job on Monday with Usher coming to Caesar's Palace. So not an Usher fan, but I need to work. It's been a while. It's been very quiet and slow. Good night to Edward, Roman. Good night to Professor Haynes. Thanks for all your work, Joe. And don't forget, I've got some images if you want them. They- I told somebody last time to send me something to UFOJoe11, which is the email I use. So it's UFOJoe11 at AOL.com. You could send it there. But I didn't even get to that last person who sent me something. Anyway, you could send it there. All right, guys, have a great night. Thanks for hanging